What's going on, gentlemen? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Corey Jung. Corey Jung is a United States Marine Corps veteran. He has had a career as a tactical athlete, and he basically learned how to balance different things. And the one thing that I really took away from the interview that I had with Corey is his philosophical approach to fitness. It's not just about numbers and just about, basic human performance. What he really focuses on is the holistic approach and basically, making sure that every element and everything that basically tied into how your body reacts or responds to fitness is taken care of. Corey is still committed to excellence and service through his human performance optimization. Basically, what he does is he helps others to feel, to move, and to perform better. He specializes in locomotion, resilience, and longevity. He's training athletes to seniors and also helping people with tactical operations. Corey is spectacular at what he does, and he's helping a whole lot of people lead a pain-free life. If you guys want to check him out, be sure to check out uprightmovement.com to learn a whole lot more about what he does. He helps people move better, feel better, and perform better. And I'm a fan. And our interview was pretty fun. So I hope you guys enjoy this one, and I hope you learn more about basically approaching fitness from a different perspective. Not one that's necessarily rooted in just numbers, but one that really focuses on what's behind and basically what the root causes are for a lot of the issues that we may or may not have, and how we can move forward. All right, enough of me talking, guys. Let's dive into this one. Before we get started, one more thing. If you want to get any PE gear, be sure to check out TotalManShop.com. That is TotalManShop.com. And use the promo code MHS2020. Promo code is MHS2020 and get 12% off. Be sure to check out their wide variety of all kinds of good quality PE equipment. All right? And that's promo code MHS2020 for 12% off. And the website, once again, is TotalManShop.com. One, two. Welcome to another episode here at the Masculine Health Solutions podcast. Today, I'm joined by Corey Jung, a former United States Marine Corps veteran. Well, currently a Marine Corps veteran, still helping out with the Corps. And he specializes in human performance optimization. The one thing that I was reading about as far as upright movement is concerned is that he's very much into helping people move better, perform better, and develop themselves to their best of their abilities. Corey, how are you today, sir?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm doing spectacular. So give us a little bit of a background of how you got started, a little bit of how it went in the Marines, and just a little bit more about you.
Well, I would say, going back, early in my life, my parents weren't exactly healthy and happy in their body, in the five senses of their mind, body. And as a child, that didn't interest me whatsoever because it seemed pretty miserable. And so, imagining, well, okay, this is what I'm witnessing, and this is the result of these people. This is their example. When what's the old saying, more of the same equals more of the same. Yeah. So early on, 10 or so, maybe even earlier, I just had this idea that this doesn't interest me. And so therefore, if I was to go 90, maybe 180 degrees away from that, I can experience perhaps, something different, perhaps something opposite. What is it for, you might not know exactly what you want, but having an idea as far as what you don't want can help kind of direct you,
Yeah.
So I just pretty much started that for myself, from my youth to my young adulthood. And then you were mentioning in the Marine Corps, right?
Yeah.
And, our first and foremost asset is ourselves. It's our most critical asset. It's human capital. I mean, so you can have all the tools and all the gadgets, right? You can have all this stuff that's outside of yourself, the equipment in the Marine Corps, or whatever else we find ourselves within. Those are extensions of ourselves. And so, first and foremost, how is this vessel vehicle of my mind and body? How am I able to perceive, interact, relate, and experience myself within the world with others in place, for instance? And then, after my time in the Marine Corps, in my previous career of about 20 years in law enforcement, seeing a lot of people who we might say weren't having the greatest experiences in life. And a lot of times, so our mind often creates our reality, but then our mind there's no separation. It's all one body, for instance, it's all one mind body. And so a sound mind and a sound body. And so a lot of times the people who I saw, struggling, that I interacted with as a law enforcement officer, a lot of times they didn't have this foundation, this vital foundation within their mind body experience. So let's just say they were acting out. A lot of times it wasn't a far fetch to also see that they weren't exactly the healthiest. They weren't exactly the happiest. And so, seeing how it's all interwoven, interconnected as far as how we're going to be in the world, with ourselves and others in place, it's like I really saw that movement can be medicine on many levels, and not just physical. I would say mental and perhaps even spiritual. And so just continued this study and practice for myself. And then on my days off years ago, I was also starting to work and coach with people in this respects as far as health and fitness and movement. And take a little segue here, but I do feel that it is related, at least in the US. The last that I heard when it comes to this, that there's approximately 100 million people in a nation of 330 or so million people who are in chronic pain.
Yeah.
So, if that's the case, or just imagine if one is in chronic pain 24/7, 365 for 6 months or so or longer, that can be very exhausting. And imagine that our lens or panorama or ourself, the world and others, and our sense of creativity and ease and novelty really gets to, we narrow and we have this tunnel vision. And imagine you're not all that happy and vital in the world. Yeah. And so that I can imagine then people start to perhaps act out, do that. I mean, you're in chronic pain, for instance. And also, this comes to my mind because I've looked into many aspects of the human experience, not just physical, psychological, even, evolutionary, our primitive past as humans, and also borrowing from mythology. And one of the key figures for me when it comes to mythology is Joseph Campbell. Yeah. If you're familiar with him. And one of the things that he said, I remember him saying, is that if you really want to help the world, help people teach people how to live in the world, and perhaps how to first live in their own unique individual world, that of their mind and body. And he also said something along the lines that a vital person helps to vitalize. Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, I really looked at like what I was doing in law enforcement was much of it was chasing symptoms, and that if we're really wanting to, get to the root of this and really have a, long lasting, significant impact, teach people how to, live in the world, live in their bodies, and try to help people be as vital as possible, because vital people help to vitalize, to the point that often we might have heard the saying that if the saying that hurt people, flip that around.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a long-winded little, backstory to me, but I hope it gives you a good panorama.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of the most overlooked things that I see, when it comes to getting people in shape, is everybody's like, oh, just do X, Y, Z. But it's like, it always comes down to the mind. And then you turn into a psychologist, like, hey man, like, why are you eating? So give us a little bit about how you deal with people, and let's say their mental wiring, I guess. How do you go about kind of conquering that? How do you assess that? And how do you help people figure out where their deficiencies are?
Well, one of the things that I share in a conversation with people early on, and first I want to make sure that they feel comfortable and safe, because sometimes we might go into a little bit of a deep dive, right? It's not just going to be the surface stuff, for instance, right? I'd really like to get to the core of someone, and essentially we're talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
But it takes some time, and this might not happen all within one session or one day, right? I would say it's crucial to have this trust, this communication, this sense of safety, and then ultimately, I imagine once those are established, then we can start to get into the why.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Why is this an interest of yours? Why is this a goal? Right. I borrowed this from Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why, and he talks about the golden circle. Okay. In the center of the circle is the why, and the circle outside of that is the how, and then in the outer ring, the third is the what. And so, for me, the why is synonymous with passion, love, legacy. The other one, the how, is like, what's the technology, what's the method, we might say, and then the what is the result. Did it work?
Yeah.
And the circle could be something like a target, a bullseye, and maybe if you're familiar, maybe some of the listeners are familiar with, like, marksmanship, shooting, archery. If you find yourself pretty consistent, let's say, of the bullseye, high and right of the bullseye,
yeah,
you just kind of adjust and go a little bit low and to the left. Yeah. And so we're kind of doing this in our own way, same but different, as far as, okay, I have my why established. How am I going to go about it? And then after, let's just say, a month or so, what's the result?
Yeah.
And I say this a lot of times with people, is that I really feel that perfection is kind of like looking for Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monsters. That I would say, if anything, let's go for good, better, or best.
Yeah.
Good, better, best. I'm a big fan of marginal gains, 1% differentiators, and being consistent. So, being kind and loving and forgiving of yourself, and that, to err is to be human. We're going to make mistakes, but, we learn. And so if I keep on going high, right, okay, more of the same equals more of the same, do something a little bit different.
Yes.
And we're kind of feeling, we're kind of playing, exploring, and then we learn.
Yeah. And that's kind of where you get that feedback, I guess. So your
Mm-hmm.
approach is more methodical in nature, which makes sense. Because most of the time, a lot of people start off from like, this is what you got to do. And you might not hit the target if you do that at all.
Yeah, and it's just like I think it's a journey. Going back to Joseph Campbell, it's the hero's journey, it's the hero's quest, and that once again, borrowing from Joseph Campbell, if you're familiar or any of the audience is familiar with that one legend within mythology, that of the quest for the Holy Grail. And so one of the things that I remember hearing about that from Joseph once again is that the quest of the Grail essentially comes down to it's the quest to reach the highest spiritual potential of a human being.
Yeah.
And that with the attainment of the Grail, it's essentially having the empathy and compassion, that basically having a sense that there's an aspect of ourself and the other, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily easy. And then that people who went out on the quest for the Holy Grail, they entered the forest in their own time, place, and manner. So it has to be unique. It has to be authentic. And I feel that you can't rush something like this.
Yeah.
There's going to be some trials. There's going to be some triumphs. It's like it's a microcosm of life. It's like, imagine an opera, and that there's several acts, several scenes, and it's a variety. It's a drama. It's a tragedy. It's a comedy. It's a romance. So there is I would say that there's a silver lining at times, even when things aren't so great or so comfortable. It's there can be beauty. Yeah.
So how important would you say mindset would be in developing all that? And what is your approach when, you're strategically trying to coach somebody and get them to the next level?
Well, I mean, once again, I emphasize the process. I'm not into. I feel a lot of times in the West, and particularly the United States, that we kind of have something of we might say a fast food culture. Bigger, better, faster now. Instant gratification, right? We see this often in technology and social media, and you hit the button or you get the certain emoji and you get the dopamine hit, right? So to kind of go into your question there, and I hope this is helpful. It's like I guess give yourself time to kind of soak it in, and wherever you are, and this might not always be easy, but as best as you can, remind yourself to have appreciation and gratitude.
Yeah.
And this is a journey. This is a process. And, this is what I have in the background for myself, running all the time when I'm working with someone, that, there's so much technology out there. There's so much information. We kind of live in a golden age of information, but there's also misinformation, right?
That too. Yeah.
So it's kind of a labyrinth, and it's not always easy to be able to differentiate, good information, the wheat from the chaff. And, people are looking for the answer, the truth. And I would say the truth is what works for you. What's the old saying is that you can't stand in the same river twice.
Yeah.
So this is a living, breathing, moving system. And a lot of times I when it comes to science,
Yeah.
does science really discover anything, or does it just uncover what's been there the whole time, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think it's just, you know what, it's always been there. And it's like, oh, releasing this new data. I'm like, well, you know, it's always been there. You just kind of found out recently.
Yeah. I mean, humans, we're finite. And let's just say the universe is infinite. And so for us to be able to wrap our minds around infinity, it's impossible, essentially. And so we like to dissect things and label, in order for us to be able to manage and have a glimpse of infinity now and again.
Yeah.
And I really try to, remind this of myself once again. And then I share this with people at times too, that, and I'm borrowing from Carl Jung, and he said something along the lines. He says, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, just be another human soul.
Yeah.
So I would say, for myself, I approach this with humility. It's an honor, it's a responsibility, and I share this with people as well, because I think it kind of helps bring them a little bit of a different lens when it comes to this. I think sometimes human beings perhaps are too focused and myopic, and going for the doing aspect.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, we're human beings.
Yeah. And it's kind of like our essential selves versus, what exists in this plane, right? And I think a lot of people kind of leave out the spiritual side of things when it comes to training. But I remember I was reading about, in Japan, they actually recommend that the best thing you can do is get moving, but get moving in the forest. It's good for your soul. And I'm like, hey, what a concept, something that we completely negate out here. Like, no, just take more pills. I'm like, well, maybe more pills aren't the best thing we can do. Right. And I mean, going to your specialty and what you do, when was it that you discovered the importance of movement and how, like, you know what, this really helps the body to heal and get better and perform better? When was that breakthrough moment for you?
When was that breakthrough? Well, I mean, I would say I definitely noticed my parents once again. I was mentioning their health and their mental state, and they died. They both died in their 60s, and so they're relatively young. But even prior to their death, they weren't very vital, and they didn't really move all that much either.
Yeah.
I mean, and this might also help with your question, is that the way I view movement is essentially movement is interacting with our environment, right? It's, and not just, the outer world, but also the inner world. And it's interacting within life. It's participating within life. We're participating, moving in space and within, yeah. So we're having a relationship with place, and 9 times out of 10 with another.
Yeah.
If you stop moving, I mean, even breathing, for instance, is moving, and we do it about 20,000 or so times a day, 8 million so times a year. If you're not moving, right? If you find yourself in a hospital and if you stop breathing, if your heart stops beating, they call that flatline, right?
Yeah.
So there's no movement. And so life is movement, right? And movement can be medicine, especially if it's mindful and sound type of movement. And because it's not just about the muscles,
Yeah.
the muscles are on the more outer periphery of the body. There's many layers, there's vital organ systems. Imagine embryology and the whole process of emergence. We started out as one cell, and then as a fully developed human being, we're about, depending on who's counting, 100 trillion cells. And so the muscles in this context, in this big, broad panorama context, is in service to these vital organs. It's not, the muscles aren't thinking, oh, six pack abs and this, that, and the other thing, at a cellular level, if you were asked any one of the 100 trillion cells or so, like, hey, what are you thinking? They're not thinking, 6 weeks to beach body or something. But they're probably, if you were to ask, hey, cells, what are you thinking? They would probably say, am I safe?
Yeah.
Can I run all the vital bodily processes? Right? Can I move within my environment? Can I interact and operate within my environment? Can I go towards resources? Can I move away from something else that might see me as a resource?
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine a hunter-gatherer. And then can I perpetuate the genes?
Yep.
I'd imagine at a cellular level, that's pretty much what's going on 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
So like when I'm looking at movement, when I'm looking at health, when I'm looking at mindset, I guess how I'm looking at it is through a big history and first principles lens.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah, that makes sense, because it's almost like, I mean, you boiled it right down to the cellular level. Right.
Well, yeah, because we are a collection, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much going on at an unconscious consciousness level. And so these cells, right? I mean, they're conscious in their own way, but as far as how we relate with ourselves, others, and place in the world is more conscious consciousness. So one of the things I heard is that, like, supposedly the majority of your consciousness, say 90% of it or so, is unconscious consciousness.
Yeah.
And so we are a collection, we are multitudes. And another fascinating thing that comes to my mind once again is that when it comes to our mind body human experience, the majority of ourselves is not human. We're mostly bacteria.
Yes. And a whole lot of viruses too.
Yeah. So we're a walking colony. One of the things that I remember hearing when it comes to this is that some people have called us, but I imagine it's not exclusive to just humans. I imagine maybe every life form on the planet fits within this category. I heard the term superorganism.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn fascinating to me.
I think so. The fact that we're around, kicking, doing all that we can do, and the fact that we're evolving the way that we are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, human evolution, in my opinion, is inevitable. It's kind of like a part of this life experience. The way I kind of see it is that we have to keep up in the ante. We got to keep pushing forward. And it's just in our nature. It's kind of like from that single cell organism and all of a sudden grow into what we do. And even this life experience itself, it's kind of like you want to get the most out of it. I really believe that it's part of our DNA. It's kind of something that's in our wiring, I believe it's part of our purpose too.
Yeah. Like legacy was what comes to my mind.
Yeah. Pretty fascinating stuff, man. But the other question I was going to ask you was posture, because I was reading about more of that on your website and how that plays into people's health. And obviously, I know a little bit about posture, but not nearly enough. I know how to correct different issues, let's say like tight hamstrings, tight quads, that kind of thing. But what are posture issues that you see with the people that you work with? What are some of the most common issues in that?
Well, this might help with your question. So imagine our species from a big history lens. I remember hearing something along the lines that walking goes back to about 6 million years or so.
Jeez.
Right. So let's just say the ancestors of modern day humans. But then modern day humans, go back to maybe, I think I saw this in the news the other day. They found some skeletal remain dating to about 230,000 years.
Jeez.
And so imagine modern day, modern civilization going back to the dawn of agriculture, right? So when we moved away from being nomadic hunter-gatherers, right? The big picture of our species, 99% or so of our experience here on Earth has been that of nomadic hunter-gatherers, and not so much in a urban setting that most of us, I think I heard something like 90% of humans today live in urban areas.
Jeez, yeah.
And so there's a saying when it comes to this conversation, is that, from a big history perspective, that most humans nowadays are experiencing hyper novelty.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine some of that is good, and probably some of that is not so good.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's this term called EEA. So I believe, if I remember right, it stands for the environmental evolutionary adaptiveness. Okay. And so if you go back once again, as far as the 90 plus some odd percentage of our species existence here on Earth, we're right. And then now have this super mismatch, hyper novelty. I'm taking a little segue here. So if you're familiar yourself or any of the audience, he had just recently passed away in last December of last year. He was a sociobiologist out of Harvard. His name was Edward O. Wilson.
Okay.
So you can look him up. E.O. Wilson, Harvard sociobiologist. He was also the author of biophilia, which in Greek means for something along the lines, love of life. And I think he also authored the book, The Future of Life.
Okay.
So one of the things that I remember E.O. Wilson saying when it comes to, we might call it the human predicament. He felt that it came down to these things as far as what's behind much of the struggle, within humanity. And he said it like this. He said, the problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before.
Yeah. So you can imagine that's kind of a recipe for disaster. And so I always say the problem of our species, and perhaps each individual, it's not just physical, it's not just mental, it's not just emotional, and perhaps it's also spiritual. And so we're meant to move upon a varied, mosaic landscape. We're meant to rest upon the surface of the earth. We're meant to move within the cycles of nature, the day and the season. We're meant to have close, intimate, meaningful relationships, especially with our family, because nomadic hunter-gatherers, they lived in groups, bands, clans, tribes, nations, say 30, 60, upwards to 100 people or so, and most of those people, they were related.
Yeah.
And when they have relationships, it's in ancestors, it's not just human beings that they speak of, right? It's also in reference to the land. It's also in reference to the animals that help to support their life. So eating close to the earth. Life eats life, life gives life. And so it's not just the two-legged, it's for the four-legged, it's the finned, and it's the winged ancestors as well.
Yeah.
And it's also the ancestors who are within the land. And so I feel, so imagine being a human being and living and moving, interacting within the world like that. And then now fast forward 21st century, we're probably having much less of that. We're probably having far less novelty. And most of us live in very temperature neutral environments indoors, and the heat and air conditionings, pretty much set.
Yeah.
When we were in nature, it was constantly varied.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were getting these stressors, these environmental stressors that helped with our body being resilient. And then, we moved on a regular basis, whereas nowadays people exercise and go to a gym. I really feel that's kind of like a supplement.
Yeah.
It's like a dietary supplement when it comes to fitness and movement. Like I've done some farm sitting on a relatively small patch of land, just 1 acre, and doing all the chores from morning through the day to the evening, and making sure all the animals are alive, fed, and mending and mending anything that was broken, and just going back and forth. I was capturing this because I have the smartwatch, like a lot of us do. And then come to find out throughout the day, I just wound up walking 7 miles.
Jeez.
I wasn't intentionally going out for like a workout.
Yeah.
And so I feel like our early ancestors, they weren't exercising. They were just living and moving and being.
Yeah.
If we look at other animal creatures out in the wild, usually they're pretty healthy and fit.
Yeah.
Because they're moving, they're living within the design that nature has given them. And I feel that's us. Exercise, I would say, we can look at it from this perspective as well, that it means to practice, borrowing from Latin.
Yeah.
And so if I'm looking to upgrade my life, right, and I'm looking across the board, through the panorama, the multitude of what it is to be a human being, right, and not just physical, right, a sound mind and a sound body. I guess in some ways, everything then can become a repetition and an exercise of practice, from my thoughts to my breathing, to my relationships, to being out in nature, having a sense of awe and wonder, and in looking at movement, maybe less from a like a workout, perspective.
Yeah.
It's like it's a time to have some awareness and mindfulness. We're exploring, we're having some play. It's a healthy relationship with self. Feel, play, explore and learn. I think a lot of times that people approach exercise something similar to that, perhaps, of an adversarial approach and view. Oh, I'm gonna beat the fat off of myself, or I gotta fix this bum knee, or I hate my knee, this bad knee. And then, the thing is that thoughts become things. Become things. And so if we're having that thought and a viewpoint and approach, I'm not quite sure how helpful and healthy that is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people come into the gym, they kind of have a preconceived notion as to what it is, which, I mean, can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. And it kind of depends on what their mindset is. But it's kind of like you say, thoughts do become things. And I think that's another thing that contributes to people being constantly injured, constantly hurt, or constantly just not wanting to move around too much because they're like, oh, this is too much work, right? And like, I just don't want to move around today because this is causing me pain. But it's not even pain, it's just discomfort at times too. It's almost, go ahead.
No, and in the gymnasium, it can be a school. If we're going back to the early years of the gymnasium, and if we're going back to early history, right? It was a school, and it wasn't just a school of the body, right? It was the whole being once again. And going back to times of antiquity, ancient Greece, the ancient trainers, or gymnaste, if I'm saying this correctly in Greek, the gymnaste, the gym instructors, perhaps would have been those of Galen, Hippocrates, Socrates, Aristotle.
Yeah.
And then one of the things I remember about Aristotle is that supposedly he had his athletes train with the wrestlers, because his belief was that in order to think deeply, that you had to be physically fit. And going back once again, a sound mind within a sound body. Yeah.
It makes sense. No, yeah. And not just that too, because you had mentioned nutrition earlier. And it was Pythagoras that I was reading about that this guy would go 100 days without eating. And they're like, why would you do that? And he's just like, well, fasting allows me to function better, function in a way that optimizes my performance, right? And it's the same deal. It's kind of like you got to put your body into duress in order to progress at all, right? Like, if not, you're just kind of sitting around at home doing nothing, experiencing all these hyper novelties, and you didn't really earn it.
Right. And I think when we like earn it, like you just said, I think we have a greater appreciation.
Yes.
It reminds me of something along the lines that like when we work hard for something, and we achieve, and we experience the fruits of our labor, it's much more gratifying and sweet, rather than just something being handed to us.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too, is that I'm not quite sure if people are really aware of this, but here's the thing: there's no shortcuts in nature.
No.
There's no shortcuts. There's no free lunches within biology, right?
No. Yeah, you're right.
So we need, some stimulus, and a lot of times I would say for the general populace, and if we're looking at like life throughout our lifespan, and hopefully at least to the 8th decade, if not more, then this is a process, and that it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
Right. And enjoying the journey, right? There's no. It reminds me of Billy Mills.
Okay.
If you remember him, I think he won the 10,000 meter race in the '64 Summer Tokyo Games, and he's from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I believe that's Sioux Nation, but he said something along the lines is that, in order to receive from Great Spirit, you have to give to Great Spirit. So I think that's something that we could borrow from and apply when it comes to this as well. Yeah, we don't get something for nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And another thing that I believe he said was something like, my life is a gift from Great Spirit, and how I live my life is a gift back to Great Spirit.
Yeah, it's deep.
So it's like, I think we could have perhaps a healthier, more sustaining outlook when it comes to this process that we're all within.
Yeah.
We're all within. And, you give your body a little bit of stimulus, not too much, not too little, just right. Especially, we're looking at the large time span of one's life, like I said, maybe the 8th decade or so. And so we're approaching this from a sustainability perspective, and that just because we have the stimulus aspect, we also need to give our body some time and some resources for adaptation.
Yeah.
So it's like a formula. So stress plus rest equals success. Stress plus rest equals resilience. If it's all stress, 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 or if it's all workout, I mean, look at the word itself, workout.
Yeah.
I'm expending essentially life force energy outside of myself.
Yeah.
And if I keep on doing that without having an equal opposite positive return, right, to the two sides of the balance scale, I'm going to run into a negative at some point.
Yeah.
I'm going to essentially, along the lines of, say, a debit card, I'm swiping my debit card, and I keep on doing that. Eventually, I'm going to run into card decline and insufficient funds.
Yep.
So I got to make some deposits as well, right?
Exactly. Well, it's kind of when it comes to, I think that's kind of the important of just kind of making sure that you can gauge it all appropriately. So obviously it depends on who the client is, because if it's an athlete, you can definitely push him a lot further, and he's got a lot more in his bank account, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Versus somebody who's starting out, where it's just kind of like, yo, I did that one workout last week and I'm dying out here.
Yeah,
Please don't
yeah.
make me do it again, right? And that's kind of where you come in to gauge it, and almost like it's almost like teaching people how to understand their bodies better, right?
Well, the body is constantly speaking to us, right? Nature is constantly speaking to us. And I believe this is a Cherokee saying. It goes something like this, is that if you don't listen to the whispers of your body, eventually you'll hear its screams.
Mm.
And so the body has no ability to lie. It's not, like the 100 trillion cells or so.
Yeah.
It's not interested in playing that game. It speaks the truth. Now, sometimes we might like the unconscious consciousness aspects of our body, right? The cells, maybe from the neck on up, maybe we might have a different inaccurate interpretation.
Yeah.
But like if I'm having a headache, let's say, my body is not telling me I have an aspirin deficiency, right? It's telling me that I'm overstressed, I'm underrested, maybe I'm in a toxic environment. There's a bunch of like pollutants, fumes in the atmosphere and air that I'm, the environment that I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm dehydrated. Maybe I had some food that I'm intolerant to, right? And like another thing too is like, so the organs speak to us.
Yeah.
I think women in particular, this probably speaks to them, is that like, if you're having your moon time, if you're having your menses, you're having inflammation of the uterine walls, and so there's like, there's inflammation, pain, redness, heat, swelling, impaired function that can radiate out into the lower back, for instance.
Yeah.
So like the physical structure aspects of the low back, skeletal muscular wise, is fine. It's a symptom of an inflamed organ, that of your uterus.
Jeez, yeah.
For instance, right? So sometimes the pain site isn't the pain source, and sometimes the pain site is right. You have what's called visceral referral.
Yeah.
So like once again, the organs are speaking the truth into outward, into the periphery of the body.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, what we were saying early on, like if you were having a conversation with any one of the cells, they're probably saying, like if you were to ask it, like, hey, what's going on? What are you thinking? And they would probably say, hey, am I safe?
Yeah.
Am I able to run the processes? Right.
Am I able to function at full capacity?
Yeah, because really, I mean, from a biological perspective, each organism on the planet, I would say even at a bacterial level, really the sole purpose program is like perpetuate the genes.
Yeah.
And that's another thing when it comes to fitness. I think a lot of times people have this definition from an exercise perspective, as far as, okay, I'm able to cover X amount of distance in X amount of time. I can perform X amount of repetitions of this movement. That might be the general lens, everyday lens when it comes to fitness, as far as the definition. If you ask a biologist as far as what's their definition of fitness, they would say it has something more to do with the perpetuation of the genes to around 4 generations.
Jeez.
So not just your children, your grandchildren. So that's your great-great-grandchildren.
Wow.
From a biological view
Standpoint,
of fitness. And this is my view of fitness, is that it's essentially, it's our behavior plus genes plus the environment equals fitness. Fitness is the ability to consistently thrive and function within the demands of our environment.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense at the end of the day. How you can't really escape that.
Well, I mean, well, here's the thing. You can do whatever you want. However, there's a price.
Yep.
Right. I might go into a little bit of an extreme, but just to give you a little bit of an example, and this might give you and some of your audience a picture when I'm describing this. So imagine some of the bodybuilding culture.
Oh yeah.
and especially at the highest level, I would say that the higher the level and the bigger the competition and prize, that it's probably less about health, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And more about the contest placement. And then I would say this is more or less the case often when it comes to sports too. Like, high performance sports competition doesn't always equate to health. Right?
No, not at all. I mean,
if you're looking at big picture, long term,
I mean, there was a bodybuilder recently. He was a Mr. Olympia, Sean Roden. He just died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
There's been a couple other guys losing limbs now. One of my favorite, Ronnie Coleman, his back is all completely destroyed. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty common trend. Like, it's almost like these guys are reaching 50, 45, and it's like, now you got to pay for your sins, kind of. Is the way I see it. But longevity just isn't a factor when it comes to bodybuilding. And I understand the sacrifice, and I love the sport, and for all intents and purposes. But at the same time, it's like playing football. It's going to have repercussions, and bodybuilding. But I think bodybuilding probably puts the most stress on your body because it's affecting you basically internally, externally, your bones, your tendons, your ligaments. I don't think anything puts as much stress on the body as much as bodybuilding does.
Oh, definitely at an organ level.
Yeah.
Because I feel a lot of times, a lot of these people at some point, to some degree, have played around a bit too much when it comes to there's certain substances that they're putting into the body. And so in some ways, what winds up happening, unfortunately, you're sacrificing your liver for a great set of biceps.
Yeah.
Now you can do whatever you want once again, but long-term health-wise, and especially if you have, if you have a full, rich life beyond the sport, right? You're well balanced, and so you have, many great relationships. Perhaps you even have a family. From the big picture perspective, it's not just about the individual. It's not just about us, myself, for instance. Like, I have to be mindful of others as well. And so, am I going to be around for their graduation? Am I going to be around for their their children, my grandchildren? Am I going to be mobile and active? Can I participate, for instance? And can I be vital and present with each of those people, and to be supportive of good relationships. Because if I'm miserable and unhappy and in chronic pain, or if I'm limited and just confined to, I don't know, maybe a wheelchair and you know, unfortunate extreme cases, then that's, you know, we're kind of taken away from that and them, these other people then, aren't we?
I think, well, yeah, because it affects them now. Instead of you really being able to be helpful, it's almost like now you become a burden, right? And I don't think anybody wants that,
No,
especially at a young age.
I mean, the reality is that we're all walking each other home, right?
Yeah.
To some degree at some point. This is, you know, borrowed from Ram Dass, and so memento mori.
Yeah.
You know, remember that yes, we have a limited time here, and that there's various seasons within nature as well as our lives, and so it's not going to be perpetual springtime and summer.
Yeah.
Right. At some point, we're going to experience something more of the fall and the winter, and so it's going to be a little bit difficult at times, and so we're not going to be as strong and resilient and vital. And not to say that we can avoid that, but perhaps we can lessen that and prolong the quality as best as we can.
Exactly.
So when we go into some of these extremes, we might be paying a price. And once again, in most cases, it's not going to be just involving ourselves, is it?
No. With that being said, though, Corey, we do got to wrap it up here. Corey, tell us a little bit about your services, what you offer, and your website, where they can find you on Instagram and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. But for those out there interested, you can find me on the internet, and you know, Google Upright Movement. I'm on social media. My name's Corey Jung, so Upright Movement, Google search, or Corey Jung, either one. And currently now, especially since we're still in the pandemic, I'm working mostly with people online in Zoom.
Okay.
We can do, and you can see some examples on my YouTube page, and maybe I'll give you a link so you can share with your people. But you know, I have that one link, the link tree, and it has all the links on the one page. But anyhow, there's some examples on YouTube as far as some of the online training. I'm also available for, you know, consultation, like remote coaching.
Okay.
Email, phone, Zoom. I'm also available for mentorship for those people who are, you know, more on the practitioner side of things, health, fitness, movement. Yeah, I would say that's what I'm up to as far as my services go presently.
Okay.
Hopefully this pandemic will lessen to where people are feeling more comfortable, and perhaps I'll return to having a space and an on-site business and service for people. I'd rather people have a feel and movement experience and have their body and the environment speak more to them than me.
No, 100%.
Ideally.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. But yeah, hopefully in the near future, everything just opens up and go back to, you know, enjoying each other's physical presence, you know.
But what's the old saying? Get busy living.
Yeah. Hopefully, man, a man can hope. But Corey, it was an absolute pleasure. And to the audience, I hope you enjoyed this one. I sure did. Any closing words, Corey?
No, I would just say that, well, let's talk about maybe health. You can break it down in an acronym, perhaps, you know, so each letter of the word. So for me, the H is for happiness, you know, within health. Ease is ease of mind, body, and spirit. A is for awareness. L is for love, longevity, and legacy. T is for thoughtfulness and thankfulness. And H is honor and be a good ancestor.
I love that.
That would be my working definition of health.
You know what? It makes perfect sense with everything we talked about today.
I'm glad. I'm glad, and this has been a pleasure. And so, thank you for having me, and thank you out there to the listeners.
All right.
Wish everyone the best.
On that note, guys, have a good one. Stay safe. Until the next episode. You know, man.